Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Mr. Lawrence,
once again, members, I want to welcome everyone to the sitting of this House. It's a pleasure to have everybody here with us, and this evening, as members of this Honourable House, we join with the Member of Parliament from Central Kingston, who has a distinguished guest visiting with us this afternoon. He's sitting in the gallery. He is a councillor from the Toronto Municipal Council, the Scarborough area of the Municipal Council, and he's here and he just wanted to come and see how is it we operate in the Parliament. So we welcome you heartily. It's good to have you. And I trust you will find this sitting an interesting one and informative. I also want to welcome those who are joining us online from the various social media platforms. We trust this will be a good and informative sitting for us all. Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, the program of work today will concentrate fully on the fourth supplementary estimates, which will be led by the Minister of Finance and the Public Service. It is expected, Madam Speaker, that all the stages will go through today in relation to a meeting of the PAAC, as well as the report from the PAAC and the parliamentary debate that will ensue. Madam Speaker, we want to join you in welcoming the councillor from the Scarborough area of Toronto. Scarborough is an area that I think is well known to most of us, as it occupies, I think, a space that has more of our Jamaican diaspora in the Toronto area, perhaps, than any other area of the Dominion of Canada. So we welcome you, sir, and we hope that you will enjoy the session of Parliament that you're exposed to here. Madam Speaker, I would invite you, therefore, to proceed with the agenda as stated. May it please you.
Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: Jamaica fourth supplementary estimate for the financial year ending March 31, 2023. Report of investigation into the allegations concerning acts of improprieties and irregularities in the procurement practices at the Bethlehem Moravian College during the period 2015-2017. White paper number 1 of 2023 entitled National Housing Policy and Implementation Plan 2023. The annual report on audited financial statements of the Jamaica Ultimate Tire Company Limited for the financial year 2018-2019. Ministry paper number 29 of 2023 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated December 12, 2022, and the Auditor General's Department Certified Appropriation Account for Head 26,000B, Ministry of National Security for the year 2017-2018, Head number 26,000A for the Ministry of National Security dated 2017-2018, and Head 26,000 for the Ministry of National Security for the year 2017-2018.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate to the Honorable House of Representatives. I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 24th day of February 2023, a bill entitled An Act to Temporarily Modify the Representation of the People Act in order to postpone the holding of a general election of members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations and a general election of the mayors of city municipalities was passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Finson, OJCD KCJP, President of the Senate.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given oral.
Wonderful. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move the following motion. Be it resolved that the 4 supplementary estimates of expenditure for the financial year ending 31st of March 2023, which was laid on the table of the House on the 28th day of February 2023, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members, the question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister of Finance and the Public Service to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move. Be it resolved that the 4 supplementary estimates of expenditure for the financial year ending March 31st, 2023, which was laid on the table of the House on the 28th day of February 2023, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report.
Members, you have heard the motion put by the Minister.
Madam Speaker, we totally support the motion. It would have helped if we could have gotten a brief just before, so that the members, certainly of the PAC, would Yeah, but it would have helped us so that we could expedite the process much more quickly, and certainly for the minister, for our spokesman.
Okay. Sure. So I'll accede to the request. Thank you, or suggestion, Madam Speaker.
Just let me put the motion to the House. Okay. Members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended.
Madam Speaker, just before you put the motion, so that at the point when the member now asks for the approval, that's when he will make the comment to give guidance to the PAC. So please put the motion. Yes.
The question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister of Finance and the Public Service to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. You have heard. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, Madam Speaker, first of all, I wanted to thank you, to thank the members of the PAC, the chairman of the PAC, for agreeing to the procedure today to have the PAC meet on the same day that the fourth supplementary is being tabled. And I'm grateful to the cooperation of all members of the House to work together to get these passed today. The fourth supplementary estimates, Madam Speaker, certainly in the second and third supplementary estimates, provisions would have been made for the implementation of the compensation restructuring. These fourth supplementary estimates arise as those discussions, negotiations are continuing, and as a result of some of the advances made in those discussions, additional provisions have to be made. The fourth supplementary estimates, therefore, makes provision, Madam Speaker, for the implementation across the entire public sector for the full implementation of the first year of the compensation restructuring. The supplementary estimates, Madam Speaker, adjust compensation-related items up by $10.1 billion, and, Madam Speaker, it also has an adjustment in capital expenditure downwards of $5.8 billion, and those capital expenditure projects relate to areas in the public investment project portfolio where projects are unlikely to be completed, or certainly the funds are unlikely to be drawn down in the next 4 weeks of the fiscal year, and therefore they're being reprogrammed in this way. The net impact of the expenditure adjustments for the recurrent and capital expenditure, Madam Speaker, after taking these two into account and some other things, is $4.3 billion. So overall, it's a net increase in the expenditure for 2022-23 of $4.3 billion, which actually would push expenditure for this year above the $1 trillion mark to $1,002.6 billion. These adjustments are, as I mentioned, Madam Speaker, largely on account of the ongoing discussions with respect to the compensation restructuring. Within the envelope of increased expenditure, there's also additional expenditure being proposed for the National Solid Waste Management Authority and the JUTC. Madam Speaker, the PAC has kindly agreed to consider the fourth supplementary estimates this afternoon. I imagine after you call for a recess of these proceedings, and thereafter, Madam Speaker, it will come back to the whole House through the Standing Finance Committee, and hopefully will lead to passage later in the afternoon.
Madam Speaker, as the opposition OC has said, the as the opposition House Leader has said, we take no objection to this process and we are facilitating it because we recognize it's for the payment of the retroactive sums and the sums to groups that have finalized their agreements. I would say we continue to have concerns about the process of negotiation between some of the public bodies and the Ministry of Finance. And I raised this before and I'll raise it again. Right now, the RGD is in the second day of a sick-out occasioned by, I would say, dissatisfaction with process. They were communicated to that they would be placed at a particular level. There seemed to have been a unilateral decision to move them to a level below. They sought clarification, they couldn't get that clarification, and as such they resorted to industrial action. Now, there are two issues. There's the substantive issue of where they are placed, but there's also the issue of how they are dealt with. And I've been getting too many complaints about correspondence to the ministry that are not being answered, in a timely fashion, which has led to a significant degree of restiveness on the part of a number of groups. Not just the RGD, there are other groups who similarly feel that way. So I want to urge the minister in trying to complete this exercise by the end of the financial year to ensure that there is adequate and timely communication with the various groupings, and that the issues that they raise are responded to in a manner. You're not going to have everybody satisfied, but if they feel that their concerns are not being addressed, then it is going to lead to restiveness, which is what exists with a number of the groups now.
So, Madam Speaker, as I would have pointed out on previous occasions, this exercise is an exercise that's not simply a salary increase. This government has completed 2 rounds of negotiations with all unions and bargaining groups in Jamaica and done so successfully without any incident. The 4-year deal between 2017 to 2021 completed in 2018 and 2019, and the 1-year negotiation in 2021. Those differ from what we're doing here in this exercise in that this is a restructuring of compensation where an old compensation system of 325 grades is being moved into a new compensation system of 16 grades. So there's a mapping exercise that is central to the process. Now, the public service is fragmented in its organization. That is a point that we have often raised here. The number of public bodies that we have, though a little smaller than 6 years ago, still stands at 140. In addition to 140 public bodies, there are 40 bargaining units and unions, which makes for 180 entities with which the ministry has to engage for this exercise. As I mentioned, engaging with, and I'm using approximate numbers, 140 public bodies, Madam Speaker, it's not about a single percentage for everybody in the public body. It's a mapping exercise from an existing structure into a new structure. By definition, persons will have different opinions as to where within a structure one ought to be placed. Another issue that is not been properly sort of expressed in the public domain is that there are pre-existing relationships with the Central Civil Service, and there are various views within the public service as to how those relationships should evolve. There are many in the Central Civil Service who believe that the premium that those in executive agencies have enjoyed over the Central Civil Service for similar jobs, that premium was intended to be temporary. That's the view for some people, that executive agencies were singled out and treated separately years ago, and the compensation restructuring is an opportunity for harmonization. There are others within executive agencies who have a different view, who believe that that premium was not intended to be temporary, and it should be extended through this exercise. The Ministry of Finance and the Public Service sits in the middle of those contending views within the public service. The civil service on one hand advance in certain positions and certain executive agencies advance in others. The process of resolving these, Madam Speaker, necessarily across 140 public bodies to be done in a single financial year, in fact, to be done between November and March, given that the agreement with the Central Confederation was agreed at in March, to get 140 public bodies done between November and March, by definition, is going to lead to what we are experiencing. It is, Madam Speaker, I would encourage you to look at it in reverse, that of 140 public bodies doing this kind of reorganization, going from 325 to 16, it is a testimony to the process that we only have 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6, Madam Speaker, out of 140. This government is doing something that should have been done decades ago. We are displaying the courage, Madam Speaker, to not walk by a structural problem that has existed for far too long and gloss over it with a single increase that applies to all groups. Instead, we're doing the hard work, Madam Speaker, which is painstaking, which requires a lot of engagement across a number of entities, 140 public bodies, and, Madam Speaker, to get it done within a year, and as I mentioned, to get it done not even within a year, between November and March, is by definition an arduous undertaking that we're committed to. And the evidence of the job that we're doing, Madam Speaker, is that of 140 public bodies, we're talking about a few that have spilled over into the public domain in this way, and I've given the reasons for it. Madam Speaker, the PAC, I believe, will be considering the supplementary estimates once you do what you have to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister, I'm going to invite you to ask for the suspension of, for the, or, and yes, you, or, and also to indicate to us that you have settled with the PAC that they will meet now. So you can.
Madam Speaker, I ask for a suspension. I beg to move for a suspension of the sitting to facilitate the meeting of the PAC. Madam Speaker, when we move to the new Parliament, we'll be able to have a meeting in the House and a meeting of the PAC at the same time. For this time, though, Madam Speaker, we have a single chamber. We have a single chamber. Wait, we have a single chamber. We have a
member. You came in a little late. We have a distinguished visitor from the Toronto Municipal Corporation. So we are on our best behavior this evening.
So, Madam Speaker, in order to accommodate the PAC meeting, Madam Speaker, I ask for the suspension of the House, and I again express gratitude to the chairman of the PAC and to the members of the PAC for agreeing to consider the supplementary estimates on the same day that being tabled. Thank you to them, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that the House be suspended to enable the PAAC to consider and to report on the 4th supplementary estimates for the financial year ending March 31st, 2023. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The House is now suspended.
Members who are not a part of the PAAC, we're about to start the meeting, so please can I have silence? Thank you. Members, let me call this meeting of the PAAC to order. May I ask Member Holness to lead us in prayer?
Our Father and our God, as we today deliberate on the nation's business, particularly as it relates to passing of our fourth supplementary estimate, we ask you for your continued guidance. Continue to lead and to bless this country, Jamaica, land we love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Yeah, this side working, that side not working.
Marshall. Check. So it's on this side. Members, to facilitate the meeting, to be able to use the mic, could we occupy the benches on this side so that, because the mics on that side work?
The government side not working, sir?
No,
Opposition side is working?
only the opposition side. Like George? You don't want to get used to it? No, but so we can facilitate the meeting though. Well, you plan to leave Parliament? You plan to leave Parliament? Thank you, members. We're at item 3 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. The only apology we have is from Member Clark. Item 4, members, let me welcome you to an impromptu sitting of the PAAC to review the 4th supplementary estimates as was tabled in the House a few minutes ago. We'll quickly go on to new business, and as would normally be, we'll have the FS do her opening remarks, and then we'll open the floor for questioning from members. Madam FS.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have with me today Mrs. Loris Jarrett, Deputy Financial Secretary, Public Expenditure Division, and Mr. Seymour Davey, Senior Director, Public Expenditure Division. The 4th Supplementary Estimates 2022-23 provides for the estimated cost of the new compensation structure for employees that were not previously addressed in the 2nd and 3rd Supplementary Estimates. The PAAC may recall that implementation of the new compensation system commenced in December 2022 with allocations made to MDAs in the 2nd Supplementary Estimates to facilitate the payment of new rates and retroactive amounts to employees paid from the Consolidated Fund and covered by agreements arrived at between the government, their unions and staff associations. The 3rd Supplementary Estimates 2022-23, which was tabled in January 2023, further allocated resources to MDAs to enable, where possible, the payment of the first-year costs of the new GOJ compensation system to some public sector groups that were not addressed in the 2nd Supplementary Estimates. The 4th Supplementary Estimates is now seeking to allocate resources to enable several remaining groups who were not covered under the 2nd and 3rd Supplementary Estimates to receive payment of the first-year costs of the new GOJ compensation system, where possible, in fiscal year 2022-23. The 4th Supplementary Estimates also includes additional allocations to the Police Department, Ministry of Education and Youth, and the tax authorities, which reflects the government's enhanced offer under the new compensation system to the Jamaica Constabulary Force, teachers and revenue collectors. The fourth supplementary estimates proposes net incremental adjustments to the central government expenditure budget of $4.3 billion, reflecting a net increase of $10.1 billion in recurrent expenditure and a net reduction of $5.8 billion in capital expenditure. Debt servicing remains at the level of the third supplementary estimates. The fourth supplementary estimate places the fiscal year 2022-23 central government expenditure at $1,2.6 billion. The fourth supplementary estimates reflects gross increase in compensation of employees of $13.8 billion, which is set off by appropriations in aid of $1.2 billion, and this relates to the Jamaica Customs Agency, and a redirection of approximately $3.7 billion in savings identified by MDAs to yield a net increase of $10.1 billion. Additional allocations under recurrent programs of approximately $1.3 billion are related to salary-related adjustments arising from the compensation restructure reflected as subvention, mainly to the JUTC and the NSWMA. The additional subvention has been offset by redirected savings of approximately $1.3 billion identified by MDAs as previously indicated. Capital expenditure reflects an overall reduction of $5.8 billion, which is approximately 9% of the third supplementary estimates. The $5.8 billion is comprised of amounts from various projects which will not be utilized during the remaining 4 weeks of the current financial year. The additional $4.3 billion in expenditure will be financed from higher tax revenues. Contributing to the higher tax revenue is the already recorded overperformance in January 2023, alongside additional tax flows arising from the further increase in wages and salaries. That's it. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Madam FS. Members, you heard the opening statement by the FS. I'm opening the floor for questions.
Chairman, item on the national security. On the capital side, the amount that is not being expended because, as the narrative says, is that the execution is being reprogrammed. But, Mr. Chairman, it's a substantial amount. And why is of significance, and we should be concerned, is that we just did a supplement, the third supplementary, not so long ago. And as we all know, this estimate of expenditure is essentially a planning document which sets out what is planned and programmed for execution in the financial year. So I'm a bit alarmed of this substantial reprogramming just a couple months after we had a supplementary, when at that stage the ministry should know reasonably well whether or not the expenditure could have been made. So I don't know if the FS, Minister of National Security, is not here. I don't know the FS can shed some light as to why is it now, so shortly after the last supplementary, this amount is being reprogrammed.
Madam FS.
Can you tell me what page you're looking at, sir?
It is 26,000C1.
Yeah.
Has to do with the purchase and overhaul of ships, coastal surveillance is $1.3 billion.
Okay, so my understanding is that the payment will actually be made in April. The ships are not yet where they expected them to be at this point.
I remember there was much a big ado about that shifting when some amount of shifting was done then, and the payments would be rescheduled. So I just want to highlight that, that it's a bit, from a planning standpoint, it seems a bit out of place. But I hear you.
So is it the delivery of the ships have been shifted, or what is the...
Okay, we're not sure if it is the actual delivery, but we understand that the process was delayed and that the payments should be now be moved to April next year.
Okay.
Question: is it the delivery shift or is it the payment
which is
being
what
shifted?
she could not, which is what we just asked, and she. Member Hannah.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, FS, the Program for Energy Management and Efficiency, the 1.167 billion. I noticed that 789 has been cut from the
56,000 C.
What has happened with the program? Is it the slow implementation of the program, or where are we, or is it discontinued?
No, it's not discontinued. It is slow implementation. Implementation of this project has been significantly behind the scheduled program. So it is expected to continue in the next fiscal year.
And they haven't updated you as to?
I don't have the full details.
Okay, thanks.
Madam FS, well, when you look at the supplementary itself, there's some savings of 6.5 billion on the capital side. And when you refer, as members refer back to, well, health is 1.2 billion, 2.5 billion in savings, education, $626 million for the primary and secondary school infrastructure program. Ministry of Energy, the 789 million for the energy management and efficiency, and the 1.3 billion. And I'm going to refer back to just a debate we had in the House recently about PIMSEC and the efficiency of programs and how it is that we program them for the spending and the efficiency of seeing through these programs. And what it would say to me is that there seems to be some gap in how it is that these programs are basically added to the budget and the delay in implementation in these programs. And my understanding is that PIMSEC was supposed to help to streamline these programs. So can you tell me if it is working, not working, or why is it that we're having so many, or is it a deliberate delay of the programs to facilitate this $6.5 billion in savings and rolling it over into the next financial year? I mean, you know.
Okay, sir. To address your last piece first, no, there is no deliberate attempt to roll it over. What we have gotten through our most recent contact with the various MDAs is that in the month that's left, they will not be able to spend these amounts. It's not related to the operation of the public investment management system. Public investment management system would have ensured that the plans for execution of these programs were properly outlined, that the things we needed to look at were covered. But they have run into other issues, various issues in the several projects.
Well, it would be interesting to know, Madam FS, especially to deal with the infrastructure program in the Ministry of Health, where half of the money is basically coming back. 626 million is in savings, 41,000 C in savings, and it would say for me, if it is that you are attempting to 41,000 C.
Let me say, I'm looking at 41,000 C. I hear you.
Sorry. So you have 889 million was budgeted, 626 million is being returned. And if we are to talk about school infrastructure. This is a small amount to spend in a financial year. So it would be interesting to know what is the problem. It is a procurement problem. What is the problem? Why is it that over 80% of that money is being returned?
Okay, so for the Ministry of Education, there were procurement issues, I understand, and therefore they are again not as far along as they were scheduled to be, and so the funds will not be spent. On the Ministry of Health, also procurement. Okay, the project for the Ministry of Health is actually being restructured, and that has delayed some of the implementation.
So is it a matter, and I know once these resources are disbursed to the various ministry departments and agencies, they are the ones who manage the procurement and everything. But when it is that the Ministry of Finance, who has to do the initial disbursement, see 80% of the resources being returned, is that a concern of the Ministry of Finance itself in seeing how they can assist those ministries in dealing with the procurement challenges? Because for school infrastructure, and 3/4 of the money is coming back, it is something that I'm sure that every Jamaican would be concerned about.
All right, so with respect to the Ministry of Health, I know that that particular project is financed by one of the multilateral entities, and there were some issues that we needed to resolve with the overall program, and the entity needed to be on board, a multilateral entity. So that took some time, and that contributed to the delay. On the procurement issues, we continue to seek to improve how procurement is effected, and we are hoping that in the near future our procurements will go much more smoothly.
Chair.
Madam FS, I've been hearing that every year, but go ahead, Member Hamilton.
Chair, I think each time we hear about a delay in relation to capital projects, it's almost always as a result of procurement delays. And I think at this point we should use the opportunity to review these procurement guidelines, because personally I believe they are quite anti-development at this stage. I don't know, I think the last review may have been in 2014, and so it is now 2023. We should at this point be able to make some adjustments to those guidelines for it to be efficient, so we don't keep coming back to the same issue as the reason for delays in this country.
Yeah. Go ahead, Madam FS.
All right, so if I may, it is not necessarily the guidelines that are contributing to the delay. It is more the execution, how it is being applied. And the procurement rules are, in fact, under review. But, again, it is not really the guidelines, because the guidelines are, in fact, in line with international standards.
So P.S., hold on, Mr. Chairman. So, P.S., there are several agencies and entities, public agencies, that all of us inside here use to implement capital projects. So once it is over a particular amount, once you are in central government versus local government, there's a certain rule that applies. And the rule even is more, we pay attention to the rules even more so as politicians, because we are, I think all of us are aware that the first point of reference that people like to draw with relations to politicians is that we are targeted for being corrupt, and that somehow we actually touch money, which we don't. I had a road, everybody in here can attest to it, through the NWA, over 1.5 years, and it did not even get to procurement. I have things at the parish council over 1 year. Because if the procurement committee doesn't meet, my corner dark. And it's not my corner, as the people I represent corner dark. And everybody in here, so they tell me what we need to do, because the guidelines are there, we all know that. Is it the people? Is it that they're not working? Is it that we need to have oversight of the oversight procurement guidelines, but we keep bureaucratizing on top of rules and regulations because we are so, and not addressing the issues as a member from North Trelawney is speaking about. And now what you have is that all of us want this capital expenditure. You have capital expenditure going back in here for schools, capital expenditure going back in here for energy management, capital expenditure going back in here for health, hospitals. We need the hospital out in the West. What is it in your mind as the leader of the programmatic part of the Ministry of Finance? What do you think we can do at this point? Because all of us in here, our hands are tied. We are sitting ducks at this point if we have capital expenditure projects that are not and cannot be implemented. All of us in here have $30 million worth of road work. It is going to get stalled because 63 of us are all going to procurement at the same time. How that go?
All right, so just a note, you did mention the...
Sorry, 40 million, in case the minister
look like
changed his
mind.
10. 40 million, which make it even worse.
Yes, go ahead, Madam Efes.
All right, so you did mention the parish councils. So the parish councils, we would not be addressing anything with respect to the parish councils here. Right, so for the central government, for each entity, they would have their procurement committee, which meets regularly, right? So in terms of the procurement committee being an issue, that should not be the case. The Ministry of Finance procurement committee meets regularly and reviews whatever is there, sends it on where it needs to go on to PPC or on to cabinet, right? So this is why I'm saying that it is not so much the guidelines, it's just that the persons who need to execute need to be properly acquainted with what they need to do. There potentially needs to be some further capacity building in terms of the procurement.
So just talk it straight now, FS. We need to keep the people on the procurement committees or not. Are they doing the proper job or not?
No, remember, Madam FS, I think what is happening, and the minister said it the last time we had this debate in the House. If it is a matter of capacity building, then believe me, it needs to be done urgently because it is hampering government and the execution of funds that come in a budget. It is at crisis proportion now. I'm telling you, because it cannot be where, and I'm going to use my Troy Bridge as an example, a bridge that was there that now has to go to PIMSEC to decide if the bridge should go back or not, don't make any sense at all, which is going to add 1 more year to a procurement process that's going to take 1 year. That don't make any sense at all. And then we wonder why it is that the public say that we are inefficient, we are not working, when they see monies coming back in a budget, when schools are leaking, no furniture in schools, no light in some, and 3/4 of the money is coming back. I don't know how to go explain that now to the general public, but there is something wrong with the procurement process, maybe not at the Ministry of Finance, but in the ministry department, in the agencies and departments. There is something wrong. Madam, yeah. Go ahead.
All right, sir. So I can just, I would just like to indicate that it is not necessarily the procurement system that is at fault. There are various other reasons why a project might not move along. You might actually be beyond procurement. You are implementing and something else.
Well, we have to find solutions for whatever the problems are, because we are coming across as inefficient. And when I say we, meaning us and the government itself, those who work within the government. So it is really to find a solution to the problem. On same 41,000C, the education transformation program, 250 million, 210 is being returned as savings. But then at the bottom here, I see where we have at head activity 29575, education system program phase 2, with a new approved estimate. Is there a difference between these two programs? Or is it one is a transformation? What's the difference between these two programs? And why is it that basically all of the money for the education transformation is being returned? What aspect of it has been delayed?
So this one. All right, it's not the same thing. There are two separate projects. The Education System Transformation Program is the STEAM Schools, project. The other one is actually close to wrap up.
Close to what?
It's close to concluding. I am not sure at this point why so much of it is not spent. So I would have to check on that.
Please. All right. Members, are there any other questions? Go ahead, member.
Not a question, just a comment, Chair, that I want us to take note that integral systems are efficient systems. It's really not a trade-off. And we have to move away from this colonial way of thinking and operating where we lead our people to believe that in order to prove that a system is one, efficient, and two, that it will work, you have to put people through the ringer. It is absolutely not true. If we need to invest in capacity, do so. If we need greater human resource, do so. Because I'm of the view that the government is doing so much, a lot of projects, but what we are experiencing is a bottleneck. It doesn't help us if we are not able to get these projects out in a timely manner. And as members of parliament, when you go to your constituents and they have heard, because they pay attention, especially when they hear that something is coming to them, you know, and after months have passed and they don't see any sign of this, right, they cost the member of parliament, right? So we have a duty to ensure, and let me tell you why, Chair, why I am especially passionate about this. Let me tell you why I am especially passionate about this. We have constituents whom, even when they are to get a little benefit, you sign them up for something. What we ask them to show, the deliverables, it can be so onerous, where at the end of the day they just feel, you know, for one bag of fertilizer, right? I saw a document where they were asking, we would have given just a little benefit, and they were asking them to prove that they lived on the land for 10 to 15 years. And my comment was, yes, we understand where that is coming from. You absolutely must account for the public's money. We must, and we are not bypassing that process. But the manner in which we go about it, it absolutely must make sense. We have to get to a place where we have deliverables and in a timely manner. And integral systems are efficient systems. It's not a trade-off. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you. Madam FS, any other questions or any other comment, Madam FS? No? No? If not, members, we move on to item 6, which is any other business. There are no other business, and the date of the next meeting will be circulated. I move for the adjournment of the meeting. Thank you, members. Thank you, Madam FS and the team from the Ministry of Finance. Sound check.
Every Jamaican has the right to know what is happening in Parliament, to know when new laws are being passed, and to give their opinions on legislation before either house.
Every Jamaican has the right to see their representatives in action, making laws, holding the executive to account, representing the people, working for the benefit of all Jamaicans.
It is your right to observe first-hand meetings of the Senate, meetings of the House of Representatives, and the